Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 10 a.m., so would like to go ahead and get started. We welcome you to the kickoff of our multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation planning update project. My name is Josh Roberts. I'm a mitigation coordinator for Larimer County out of the Office of Emergency Management. I'll be the primary point of contact for this plan update, and soon I'm going to turn it over to Scott Field, who you guys see on your video screen with WSP. WSP is our planning consultant firm that's going to help us update this plan. And Scott is the project manager. He'll be the lead for WSP and essentially, our right-hand man, if you will, throughout this plan update process. So real quick to get us started, a little quick insight about this kickoff meeting. So basically over the next hour or two, we're going to just be reorienting everyone to this concept of a hazard mitigation plan, what it is versus what it's not, as well as Scott is going to give us some insight on sort of what to expect throughout the next roughly year or so throughout the plan update process, as we go forward. Now, we'll certainly take any questions you guys have, as we go. And if I can just ask, you can either drop your question in the chat. Scott, I'll monitor the chat for us while you're emceeing. Or if you guys do have a question, you'd rather just verbalize, if you don't mind, just raise your hand in the raise hand feature there within Zoom. And Scott, I'll help you kind of facilitate any Q&A that comes up. I know we do have some spots within the presentation to offer some, question and answer. But, really, if you have a question, just tone it out in those ways described and we'll help. And just another little bit of housekeeping since we're on the housekeeping thing here. You guys might know I'm recording this meeting. We had a number of folks that couldn't make it today. And so what we're going to do is we'll record this webinar and then we'll hang it on the Larimer County Office of Emergency Management website in the days that follow. And we'll be providing a web page that's really just dedicated to our hazard mitigation plan update as we go. So more to follow on that, and we'll send out some info through the big email group that I have as well. And on that, just to tone out, if you or someone on your team you're not sure is on the email group and you want them on our email group too, that we're going to use for project communications for this thing, just shoot me, a message and we'll get them added. No problem at all. So all that said, without further ado, welcome again to the Hazard Mitigation Plan Update Project Kickoff Meeting. And more importantly, we welcome, you not to just this meeting here, but of course to our process as we go and your involvement in the planning process over this next year or so. So really look forward to working with everyone. And with that, Scott, I'd like to just turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Josh. Do you want to talk about the participation tracker real quick and how we're going to use that going forward?
Yeah, I sure will. And I can speak more to it, later if we have any slides devoted to it. You guys may notice in your chat from Bailey Knock, Bailey's with WSP. So they pasted a little form link here. That's really going to be just for a recording attendance at the kickoff meeting here. We do have another participation tracker as well. And I think, Scott, that's the QR code that you have on the
Correct.
screen. So as part of, many of you may or may not know, so we received a grant in working with partners at the state's Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to hire Scott and Scott's team to help us with this plan update. And part of that grant, there is a local match requirement. And so as opposed to the county paying cash for that, we have an opportunity to just make sure that we're tracking all of your time spent on hazard mitigation, project things. We can capture that and apply an hourly rate to it that'll really help offset the county's cost. So if you don't mind scanning this QR code, if you'd like, to get an idea of what that participation tracker form would look like, we'll capture that data. And as we go over the next year or so, anytime that you work on hazard mitigation plan things, and I'll be sure to tone this out to Scott or I will, in emails and meetings as we go. But if you don't mind just using that, it'll be an easy way for us to just capture the time you spent on it so that we can document that in-kind value there, for the county's local match requirement to the grant. So any questions on that, just message me, tell me now, or get with me later. But yeah, thanks, Scott, for that opportunity there.
Cool. Okay. Just want to make sure we had that before we get going. So
So,
thanks, Josh. As Josh said, my name's Scott Field. I'm a consultant with a company called WSP. I will go through some quick housekeeping notes before we get going here. Maybe if my computer has suddenly decided not to advance slides. There we go. Okay. Josh already covered a bunch of this. We do ask that you mute your mic when you're not speaking. I know at this point we're all pretty proficient in Zoom calls, but just to cut down on background noise. But we do want your participation. We really do want your input and feedback. So if you do have something to say, please raise your hand, use the chat log. Also, if what I usually do is if somebody comes up on camera, that's usually a clue to me that you have something to say. So whatever works, but we really want your feedback. So please feel free. Yeah, and as Josh said, we'll make the recording and everything else available after this. So we've got gonna go through, just as Josh said, kind of we're gonna repaste that link here in the chat in a second. I apologize, folks. So we're going to do quick introduce folks on our side and on the Larimer OEM side. Our partners from the Colorado Division, of Homeland Security and Emergency Management are going to give a little overview of what hazard mitigation is and isn't and what we're doing here. Then I'm going to walk you through what the process is, what the requirements are, and what you can expect over the next year. We're going to be doing this. We're going to talk real briefly about a couple additional planning processes or efforts that are going on that are kind of tied into this. Then we're going to talk about what the schedule and next steps are. So basically, the goal of this webinar here today is just kind of to get everybody familiar with what's to expect over the next year and what we're doing here. So real quickly, you already met Josh. I'm sure you all know Lori Hodges, who's the director of OEM there in Larimer County. He said, my name's Scott Field. I've been doing emergency management about 25 years. I was the director of emergency management for Denver for a while. And now I'm been on the consultant side for a few years. In fact, if those of you who were here the last time we updated this plan 5 years ago, I was the project manager then too, but I had a different shirt then. We were called Wood Environment Infrastructure. We got bought out and now we are WSP, but it's the same team here for the most part. So Chris Johnson is on here as my deputy project manager. Some of you may know Jeff Brislon from previous planning efforts. He's my boss, and he's going to be doing quality control and kind of reviewing the plans. Mac Chambers is our GIS expert. Again, he did all the GIS analysis last time around, so he's very schooled and up to speed on Larimer County. And then also want to introduce Bailey Knock and Carly Hager, who are our two planners who are going to be doing the bulk of the work that I'm up here taking credit for. So again, if you haven't, please, if you can scan this QR code, that'll go ahead and put your information in that participation tracker so we know who attended today. All right, with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Jason, and I'll let you introduce yourself and let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Scott. Good morning to everybody. My name is Jason Humble. As Scott said, I'm with the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management with the state, specifically work in the mitigation section. So at the end, I'll be part of reviewing the document. I'll be with y'all along the way, and then we'll get the document to FEMA for final approval. Slide, please. Okay, like I said, appreciate Scott and Josh. Let me have just a few minutes here just to kind of set the table of what a mitigation plan is, what we get out of it. One thing to point out, and the point of this slide is mitigation should be something we're doing throughout the process. It's not a one-time deal. It's not a hey, we mitigated once and we left it. Even while we're in the middle of a disaster, we're always trying to reduce and mitigate the hazards and prevent as much damage as possible. So that's really the point of this, is while we have a plan, even as things are going, as we're responding through the recovery and that kind of stuff, we're always trying to mitigate it. And I will say, kicking off, on the mitigation plan, the beauty of doing this plan is this is a dedicated time, not doing it in the heat of the moment with the disaster. We're taking a dedicated time to sit down kind of at ground speed zero and to look at the things that keep you up at night as emergency managers, and then what we can do about it. So next slide, please, Scott. Okay, so some of the benefits you get out of this, like I said, it's a comprehensive assessment. It's a chance to sit down and look at the hazards. What's the best way we can mitigate it? The two biggest pieces you'll find as we go along in this process is the risk assessment. That's the part where we sit down and go, really, what is Larimer County concerned about for risks? And then the mitigation strategy, what can we do about it, okay? These HMPs, the hazard mitigation plans, they run on a 5-year cycle. We're coming up on the end of our 5-year cycle, which is why we're going through this process here. It's twofold, right? So as the slide says here, one of the big things that you get out of having a current plan is it makes you eligible for the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Assistance, the HMA grants. It says 25, depending on the particular grant that you're going for, that could change. This particular one that we have a grant to write is 25. But as you find yourself, when you write the plan, it opens you up to more funds that can change, right? So that said, every jurisdiction, if you are actually a participant, you have the ability to seek out this funding on your own. Some of the examples there, you got flood mitigation assistance, the hazard mitigation grant program. This is a post-disaster. If a disaster is declared and you have a current plan, that lets you be able to tap into the funds that are there. And it doesn't even have to be in the particular disaster that happened, right? It just opens that up, that funding source. Some of the other benefits is the community wildfire protection plan, and then the simultaneous community rating system. And please, if you have a question as I'm going along, just raise your hand and jump in. Scott, next slide, please. Okay, folks, like I said, the two pieces that you have in here, you have the risk assessment and then you have the mitigation strategy, where you all sit down as a county, as participants, and come up with what are some projects we want to do to mitigate. And I throw this out here, and this isn't a comprehensive list. And I will say this to the fact that within our section, we have the project specialist. So as we get to that phase, if you have a question, hey, does this project fund, would mitigation funding be able to get at this thing that I'm interested in? And there is a requirement that for every risk we have identified, we have to have a mitigation action to it. But the point of this slide is to show what a mitigation action to be is considered when it comes to seeking federal funding on here. That's not to say that these aren't valid programs and that there aren't ways to get to that funding. It's just for these particular types of dollars. So the example here in the top left, like elevated home by river, right? So if you're in a floodplain, this is a home that's constantly flooded every time the river comes through. you would be able to have access to see about elevating that home. That would be a project that would fit. Another one would be defensible space, fuel reduction. If you want to clear out the the possible source, that would count, as well as the bottom there. If you have a home that's constantly in a landslide area, you could get federal funding for that. The two examples here, and those, like I said, this is not to say that these aren't valid things, that you may need as a community, but like a police command vehicle radios, these specifically fit under response. So you wouldn't be able to get mitigation money for it because it would fall under response. The one question that always comes up is, and some of this is a little bit of semantics and how you work it. An evacuation route would be considered part of a response. But if you had a project that you went to mitigate, the loss of that room if it is, or the loss of that road if a disaster happened, if you mitigated that in some ways, you would be able to apply for mitigation dollars with that. And like I said, that's just a quick overview as we're going through this. Absolutely, we'll be along the process. So if you have questions when we get to the mitigation strategy, I can put you in touch with the specialists we have that work this all the time. Slide, please, Scott. Okay, this is just example of the things. Like I said, we're building the mitigation plan here, and then what that does is that makes you eligible for federal funding for those particular actions or projects. This is just a snapshot of where we have right now. Over 200 projects. You can see all the disciplines here. So us as a state, we've had very good luck of being able to reach into that federal funding and use it for mitigation projects. I'll go ahead and speak to the elephant in the room, which is FEMA and FEMA funding. Absolutely, there's some uncertainty, and we don't know where the future is going to go. But what I will say is what we see right now is the projects that have been approved. The funding has been coming along. The hazard mitigation plans have been being approved. So the process is working the way it is. And like I said, it's twofold here with what you get with a hazard mitigation plan. The transactional piece is you get a plan written, and then you have access to the funding. But the other, I think, as worthy as you have the time to sit and actually make a workable, usable plan, something that's not just checking the box, but something that is usable and something that Larimer County has put thought into of what the risks are and what to do with. Lori, ma'am, did you have a question for me?
No, just a quick comment for everybody. Just so you know, we do have a contingency plan for this project. So even though there is uncertainty with regard to FEMA funding, this plan will go forward, and it will, go through whatever approvals it needs to go through, however FEMA looks at the end of this project. But I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that we wouldn't, if there's some kind of a funding disruption, it's not going to interrupt this plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, ma'am, for that. And as we were finding, there are other funding sources. I mean, and right now the regulation states you have to have the 5-year plan. I have to have an active mitigation plan to be able to have those funding. And like I said, there are other things besides FEMA funding. There is a state enterprise that is a funding source for mitigation projects. So the bottom line is there's absolute goodness in the plan itself. And then there are other sources that you can take the actions from this plan and use. Next slide, please, Scott. Okay, the one thing I'll point out here to you is what the plan isn't, right? So we talked about the goodness of what you get out of it. It's not a regulatory document, so anything we do as a group and come in and work on this, we're not creating, regulations. This is our thoughts on what the concerns are and what the projects are. But the other piece is there, it's not a set in stone commitment, right? I would kind of look at this as a wish list, as a Christmas list, as in something, especially when you get to the mitigation actions of what are the things that keep you up that you want to address and do something with. There's not people aren't going to come back and go, you said you were going to do this, you didn't do that. We will find as we go along, there'll be mitigation actions that were written in the last plan that will probably continue in the next plan, right? That you identify, these are things we still want to get at, right? It's good to address it and to put it on paper. Like I said, hopefully it's that fight for funding to be able to do it. But like I said, it's important to identify what the risks are. The other thing is, like I said, FEMA and state, we both encourage communities to be ambitious and practical. The one thing I'll say here is while there are FEMA requirements to get that FEMA approval, the bottom line is this is Larimer County's hazard mitigation plan. So make the plan that best works for you, that is best the items that are concern of you, right? So even if it's not something that's required by FEMA, one piece I'll say that was probably in the last plan you wrote, there was a mention of and it used to be a criteria to talk about climate change, talk about socially vulnerable populations. That is no longer a FEMA requirement, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be a something that you mentioned. If that's an item that the county's concerned about, you can absolutely put in or anything to that example. And the bottom part here is we absolutely understand the actions are dependent on the availability of resources. Right? There's only so much you can do with the money that have available. So some of that will be a prioritization. But like I said, it's important to capture the the risks and then the best course of action that you think can get at some of those risks. And then the final bit there is you're not going to be punished. There's not going to be a report card at the end that's going to say, hey, you weren't able to do this, you failed, right? Like I said, there'll be some actions that will continue from plan to plan to plan, and that's okay. Like I said, back to the line above there, some of it is, or most of it is really resource dependent. So if there's no questions on that, we'll go to the next slide, please, Scott.
Yep, we do
Lori,
have
I think
a
I'm sorry.
question. Lori, go ahead. You had your hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, just really quick with regard to the language in the plan. We do plan on still having a social vulnerability index or analysis as part of the plan. But the AG recently came out with guidance for us. I guess it's not guidance, it's like rules, whatever it is, about the language that we can use. So we will also be looking at what language is in this plan and making sure that the language is consistent with the AG's opinion on what we can and cannot do. But I did want to let everybody know that we can't really have a good hazard mitigation plan, I don't think, without knowing where our vulnerabilities lie. And part of that vulnerability is a social vulnerability. So when you guys are creating your actions, and I don't know if you guys are going to bring this up later, but just keep in mind that the actions cannot be tied to certain things. So we'll make sure that that guidance is clear to you. So like you can't have a mitigation action specific to a social vulnerability or a race or whatever, so we'll have that guidance out for you guys as you guys are doing your actions. But I wanted to make sure you guys knew that we're still going to be doing the social vulnerability analysis as part of this plan. We'll just be careful about the language that we use.
Right. Thanks, Lori.
Yeah,
and don't worry about that. Just don't worry about that too much from a language standpoint. That's where you hired a bunch of overpriced mercenaries to help you write it. So we'll make sure the verbiage works. So.
Well, and the one thing on that, Lori, I'll say is the good news is what we've seen, because we were concerned of this when that guidance came out, is um, it is it is not a, hey, kicking the plan back because it mentions climate change or so that is not happening. Basically, what is happening, they are just not reviewing those sections. They were moving those along, but it's absolutely your plan and you are allowed to include that. So that's been good to see that it's not a, hey, cross this out, kick it back, don't include that. It's just not something that's reviewed. So that's been a good point. At this point, I think I'll turn it back. Like I said, thank you for the opportunity. The one thing I'll say, I know not everybody believes this when they hear, we're from the state, we're here to help. But in this case, we absolutely are. I plan on attending all of the work, all of the kick, the meetings you all have. Feel free to send the information as we go. That, because really my goal is to get to yes, to get this thing to approved for the county. So you have, all the benefits from come that as soon as possible. So please feel free to include me if you have questions as we go along in the writing here. Let me know, bring me in, and happy to add any insight we have. And the other pieces, like I said, watching what is going around the state. Can provide examples from other. We can provide those county or those contacts if you need it. So once again, thanks for the opportunity, and I'll stay on. So if there's any questions, let me know.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Jason, for that. Also, I just kind of wanted to reiterate something. Scott, could you cycle back to that slide that showed the map of the FEMA HMA mitigation projects? Yeah. So, y'all, in addition to doing this plan for purposes of ensuring eligibility to FEMA's hazard mitigation assistance grant programs in that portfolio there, and if you look on this map, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are projects funded through HMA, whether it's FMA or HMGP or previous BRIC grant programs, right?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. So for everyone, in addition to ensuring eligibility to access those grant programs, this plan and participating in this will provide you that ability to do so and that eligibility to apply for these things. If you look at that map, you just see a couple of dots in Larimer County, right? Well, we all know that there's a ton more mitigation projects that are happening. Perhaps they're funded through other grant programs. And so importantly, what this planning process will allow us to do is just that intentional set aside time for us to organize around mitigation activities, to coordinate that stuff. Here's what we're doing. What are y'all doing? To where we can sync some things up that it might have benefit to other grant programs or projects, mitigation activity down the line. So that's also a really important piece I wanted to reiterate. So thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Adam, did you have something to say? I saw you were up on camera there.
No, I think I accidentally raised my hand just out of reflex, so no.
No worries. No worries. It's nice to know that when people come on camera, just to know someone's awake and actually listening. I would ask if you do plan to spend this meeting reading a book, please turn your camera off. So we did have one kickoff meeting where somebody spent the entire meeting with their back to the camera, feet up on the desk, reading a paperback with their camera on. And I'd like to think all his buddies were trying to message him to tell him that his camera was on, but his back was to the screen and he wasn't paying any attention. So, yeah. All right. So with that, we're going to jump into kind of what are the requirements are. And a lot of this is just going into a little more detail of stuff that Jason already kind of brought up. So If you have a perception from the news and everything that disaster costs have been rising, that is 100% accurate. That is a true statement. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. Some of it is just with population growth, more people living in hazardous areas. We've got a lot more infrastructure and stuff. We're also seeing increased costs for disaster response and recovery. Partly that is just increased cost of materials. We're building buildings smarter and better so that they are if I were to show you the chart of deaths from disasters, that arrow's going down, that arrow's going the right way. And part of that is because we spend more money building buildings so that they are less likely to collapse and kill people, for example. But that also then means they're more expensive to replace. And also we are seeing more severe hazard events. We're seeing more disaster declarations and so forth. So it's definitely on the increase. This chart is from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and this is just looking at atmospheric disasters, so no earthquakes, no terrorism or whatever, but just looking at billion-dollar disasters, and this is adjusted for inflation. Going back the last 45 years, you can see back, and again, these are adjusted to our dollars. You can see back in the day, I mean, if we had 4 or 5 of those a year as a country, that was a really bad year. And now, like, hey, we only had 15. That's a slow year. And I believe these numbers for 2024 is for only part of the year. So yeah, they're happening more frequently. They're more expensive. And like I said, it's something there's been a lot of discussion about at the federal level, but one of the best things we can do to reduce those costs is spend money up front. To reduce our vulnerability to those disasters. So continuing to do nothing is just too expensive. We do know a lot of these hazards are stuff that we know is going to happen. We know that there's going to be flooding. We know to some degree where that's likely to be. We know where the forest areas that are most at risk of wildfire are. We know where a lot of these things are. They're somewhat predictable. I can't tell you when you're going to have the 1% flood, but I'm pretty sure you're going to have one, right? And again, as was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of activities or actions we can take to reduce these vulnerabilities. The stuff that's been proven to work here in Colorado and across the nation, they work well and they're very cost effective. There is funding available to help. And as was mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly what grants or what they're going to be called and so forth. So by the time we finish this plan, I think the landscape will be a little more clear. But everything we're hearing is at least everything I'm hearing and the people I've talked to is everyone expects that there will be a continued mitigation grant funding. Just don't know what exactly it's going to look like yet, but probably not too dissimilar to what we have. And this second to last bullet here is kind of the key one to me. I mean, if we know these sort of disasters are going to happen, and we know we can spend a little money ahead of time and spend $1 to save $6 and to save lives, I think there's a real ethical responsibility to do that as a public servant. So we've used the term mitigation a lot. We've thrown that word around. For the purposes of this plan, we're using a fairly specific definition of that, which is the FEMA definition, which is any sustained action to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to life or property from hazards. I would say that definition doesn't include the environment, but environmental impacts and even economic impacts and so forth are also covered under this. But we're looking at sustained action, anything that is going to last a long time, not something that, as again, we're not looking at response or preparedness costs to an extent. And some of this is just because of the way the grants were written and the way the legislation was written by Congress. So FEMA is bound by that. Larimer County isn't necessarily. So as Jason said before, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about, what is a true mitigation action by FEMA's definition in terms of what those specific grants will pay for. But there's a lot of other grants out there. And if something's important to Larimer County, we want to include it and we want to and then we'll find a way to help you pay for it. The regulation that drives all this is the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. I promise I'm not going to read that at you. There is The FEMA policy that implements that was just re-released in April of this year, was as an addendum. There are some changes from the last go around 5 years ago, and we'll try and highlight those. For the most part, it's stuff that Larimer County was already doing that has now become kind of a national requirement. So, because Larimer's kind of always been ahead of the curve on stuff like that. So, we will talk about some of the changes, but there may be a few things that look a little differently for those of you who were here 5 years ago. Basically, we've got a 4-step process we're going to follow here. And you can see there's some different tasks underneath this, but step 1 is kind of what I call the getting the band back together phase, okay, which is we're convening the committee, we're figuring out who's in, what jurisdictions are participating, what size of the planning area, and kind of figuring out how we're going to get people involved. Step 2 is that risk assessment that Jason mentioned. This is the what can go wrong stage, where we figure out what are the hazards that are most likely to impact Larimer and have the biggest impact, and how can we quantify those or get some kind of sense of how bad is likely to be. And then stage 3 is the what are we going to do about it? This is where we're developing goals, we're developing mitigation projects and activities that are going to reduce those risks. And then step 4 is adopt the plan and then implement it. And that last step is key. One thing and this is taking off my consultant hat and just putting my emergency manager hat on for a minute, is the big weakness with hazard mitigation in this country since the DMA was passed in 2000 has always been follow through. You pay this team of overpriced mercenaries to write this pretty plan, and it sits on the shelf in a 3-ring binder for 5 years, and no one touches it until it's time to update the plan next time around. That's always kind of been the downfall with a lot of these plans. Fortunately, in Larimer County, that is not the case. You guys do use this plan and have referred to it and implemented it throughout the county. And we want to make sure, we want to do everything we can to make sure this is a plan that is a living document and is something that is actually of use to the county and to all of you. And when I say the county, I mean, I'm including the jurisdictions within the county. Speaking of jurisdictions, let's talk about them for a minute. So this is the list we currently have of the municipalities that have provided letters of intent to participate. I'm not going to read the list to you here, but it's basically all of the incorporated municipalities. We'll talk about participation here in a minute. We also have a number of fire protection districts, many of whom were in the plan last time, and we have a few new districts that have joined this time. So great. Happy to have you on board. Thank you. I don't have a map of this one yet, but these are the other special districts, and I realize we've lumped everybody else here together under other, but we have school districts, watershed coalitions, conservancy districts, and so forth. We're in the process of putting together a map of those district boundaries, which, by the way, if I haven't already, we'll probably be reaching out to you after this meeting to confirm, hey, this is what we have for you in terms of your boundary and so forth. This is what we have for your legal name. Tell us what you want to be called, etc. So we'll be reaching out to you about that. So that's who we have when I talk about the participating jurisdictions. Those are the jurisdictions that are looking to get FEMA approval to be approved as a participant in this plan and be eligible for FEMA funding. Now, if there's a district or some group that is within the county that is not a participant in the plan and is just you want to participate as a stakeholder, you can still do projects. You would just have to partner with one of these participating jurisdictions. And yes, I'm pointing at my screen with my finger, like you can see what I'm pointing at. I do that every time. So, for example, if you wanted to do a project in the county, you would partner with Larimer County, and they would have to put in the funding for that. So in terms of participation, and this is where we're getting into the audience participation part, because I have a question for the participating jurisdictions and Jason, feel free to jump in and elaborate on this. When we did the plan 5 years ago, the guidance or the general sense of is if your jurisdiction or if your city or your fire district or whatever was in 2 counties, that you should participate in both county plans. To make sure you're involved in both of those processes. And that's fine, but that's a lot of work. So the guidance from DHSEM now has been that if you participate in one plan, you're good. as long as you're fully included in that plan. So for example, if you participate in this planning effort, say for the town of Windsor or Windsor Severance Fire, if you participate in this plan, we're going to include the parts of Windsor that are in Weld County. Okay, we're going to include the parts of Lyons Fire that are in Boulder County. So if you tell us to, we're going to include all that. So if you want to do a project in the part of your jurisdiction that is outside of Larimer County, you will still be covered. So that said, if some of you are already participating in the Weld County plan or the Boulder County Hazard Mitigation Plan, and I know Weld has just kicked off their update process with a company called WSB, not to confuse things anymore, but we were here first. They have almost the same logo, except the P is a B. You can't make this up. But if you are fully participating in the Weld County plan, you do not have to participate in this plan. You are welcome to still join. Yes. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. You don't have to answer right now, but we will be reaching out to you and just confirm, like I said, so Windsor Severance or Johnstown or whoever, if you're in the Weld County plan, you're still welcome to come to meetings, but we don't have to bug you to include mitigation actions in this plan if you've already got them in the other plan and so forth. So give that some thought, and we or OEM will be reaching out to you to just kind of confirm who's in and who's out. We don't want to make you do any more work than you have to. Yeah, Lori, go ahead.
Hey, so for City of Greeley specifically, they have a lot of infrastructure in Larimer County, and they might want to do a mitigation action that's just in Larimer County, but it's for their infrastructure. If they just do the Weld plan, are they okay putting in an action in the Weld plan that's strictly Larimer County, or should they have an action in Larimer County's plan?
They can do both, is what I would say. So the infrastructure is in unincorporated Larimer County, it's not in the city limits, right?
Well, Greeley's not in Larimer at all.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it would be somewhere, whether it's in Fort Collins or unincorporated Larimer, it would be in Larimer County.
Yeah.
All unincorporated Larimer County pretty much is where our two water treatment plants are, plus the watershed, plus our high mountain reservoirs, plus many of our transmission lines. So these weren't covered in the Weld County plan because it's all in Larimer County.
Okay. So I did want to make sure that was a clarification, because like Windsor and Berthoud and some other places, they're partly in Larimer, but Greeley's kind of a weird one.
Yeah. But we're happy to include those in this plan if you want to.
Scott.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because we want you to be eligible for that. So if you're not getting in the Weld County plan, and I've reached out to WSB, we want to, who I've met them, haven't done a plan with them before, but we want to reach out to them and just kind of make sure we're, everybody's making sure everybody's taken care of. But yeah, please submit those here, and we'll include them in this plan.
Perfect. Thank
Denise?
you so much.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
it's Peter.
Yeah.
So we are including all of our water assets in the Weld County plan as well. That was the state's recommendation. I think for us, to your point and Lori's point of just making sure that we're on the safe side, anything water specific, we're going to include in the Larimer County plan as well. So Greeley Emergency Management has all that information already. My assumption is that it will just be a format change into whatever format the Larimer County plan needs.
Perfect. No, that's perfect. That's great. Denise, you had your hand up?
Peter just said the basic same thing that I was going to say. My question was for our communities that are split, Severance, Windsor. I mean, they're participating in our plan, but I can also see that their interests would also be in Larimer County because there's a lot of resources that they may be getting from the Larimer County side that we don't have. So it's fine to participate in both. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. It's a big time suck for them, obviously. But I just want to make sure it's perfectly fine that they do participate in both.
Absolutely. And whether or not you're a participating jurisdiction in terms of seeking FEMA approval as part of this plan, we'd still love to have you at the table as a stakeholder.
Absolutely. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks, Denise. And Jason, did you want to follow up on that?
No, I mean, Scott, you hit on basically what I was going to say there. It's very important to understand, and the words matter here, the difference between being a participant and being a stakeholder. Absolutely, it's good to be a stakeholder there, but there's not a requirement to have to be a participant in both. And that's the beauty that comes with, I think, special districts being participants, is they are able to get across, you know, those kind of artificial borders we have here. They're able to work, you know, individual actions and projects throughout, you know, their whole area and not have to be bound to, well, I have to get this from this county and this from this county. So there's beauty in that, you know, where they can actually get at the, you know, where their area is, but not a requirement. And we're really big about it in the mitigation section, is not creating unnecessary work, right? If you're a participant one and you've done all the steps to be a participant, you don't have to go to every single county. But as we've mentioned, it may be prudent to be a stakeholder and understand, you know, all that and even the differences between the different counties. So,
right. And kind of, we'll get into kind of what the difference between participating and stakeholders is, but the short version up front here is stakeholders get a lot fewer nagging emails from me and from Josh saying, hey, we really need this information to check this box for the plan. Whereas if you're a stakeholder, you just get to come to a couple of meetings and you can submit some mitigation actions, and we love you and you're all good. So
yeah, and the payoff with that, Scott, of being a participant is now you have that that direct, you can go for direct funding. You don't have to go back to the county or whoever. If you are a full participant, if you have a project, you can apply straight to the state and FEMA as a participant. So just to make sure that's
right. And participant in either plan. So
either plan.
Cool. So I'm sure that was clear as mud. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or to Josh and Lori or whoever, and we'll get that resolved. So as far as the participating jurisdictions, so the body that's going to be driving the train for this plan update effort is called the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee, or HMPC. You'll hear me use that acronym a bunch. This just kind of a sampling of who all has been invited or will be invited to these meetings. From a practical standpoint, if you're kind of coming to meetings, congratulations, you're on the HMPC. So there are some lists we have of people that specifically need to be invited. I've underlined a few that are new to this plan update, which is social services is kind of, as has been alluded to, is now they're backing off from that as a requirement, but it's still important to have them at the table. So we're reaching out to, like, you know, volunteer organizations active in disasters and that sort of thing. Housing is there's a lot of mitigation efforts around housing, both pre and post disaster. So we're making sure they're at the table. And then dam owners. This has been one of the grant programs we haven't mentioned is the rehabilitation of high hazard potential dams, which it's another FEMA grant. It has not been killed currently. It is still, and there's quite a bit of money there. And it's kind of just what it says. If there's a dam that is in Larimer County or that can impact Larimer County that needs a little work done, this is a fairly large grant program to help with that. But part of that requirement is inviting dam owners to the table. A lot of the dams in Larimer County are owned by local government. So we already have that. We're just going to make sure those are included. So, and again, we'll be reaching out to different folks throughout this process. We mentioned a number of Fate and Federal, state and federal partners that we'll be inviting to participate. Not all these folks are going to come to the meetings, but they may be providing information. They may be reviewing the draft when it's ready. I'm not going to go through and read the list here, but as you see, we've already got the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management on the call. FEMA Region 8 is obviously a very active participant, whether they're on the calls or not. But fortunately, DHSEM has a really good relationship with them and a really good understanding of what they're looking for. We're really lucky doing Colorado plans because once we get once a plan gets through state review, if Jason's crew has bought off on it, then we're pretty sure it's going to get through FEMA with minimal, if any, comments. They do a really good job of reviewing for that. But there's a number of different state agencies on here at state and federal partners that we'll be reaching out to at some point during the process. And then we have some other different stakeholders. We have invited the neighboring counties to participate, or at least to, because we know that disasters have a nasty habit of not stopping right at the county line. So we want to make sure that it's coordinated with neighboring jurisdictions' plans. Fortunately, we're lucky here in Larimer County, a lot of the special districts that are listed here have actually been invited as participants rather than as stakeholders, which is wonderful. We don't usually see that level of participation. So again, hats off to Larimer County. There's a number of other groups I've already mentioned, like business and academia. What I would now ask for the group is who are we missing? Who's not here from either that's not on the call currently or looking at that list, that who's not listed that we should invite, either because they should be part of the process or because they have information we might need, or that there are specific vulnerabilities or stuff that they have knowledge of or access to. Lori.
Josh, did we invite the volunteer fire departments? Because I know they can't have actions, but we can have actions on their behalf. So I don't know if we invited them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did, Lori, but I'll double check and certainly
I believe
extend,
so.
Another invite.
Okay.
Yep.
And just making sure they know that, yes, they can have actions that then would just be part of our actions. Okay.
Yep, totally.
Excellent. Anything else? Anyone else have any ideas of other organizations that we should involve here or we should reach out to?
What about utilities?
Sorry.
Yeah, utilities are a great here. I know we have Northern Water on the call. I can't remember if we've reached out to the utility outfits. Gosh.
Yeah, I know there's been some that we just haven't reached out to yet, but I'll add that as a to-do item and follow up. Just was talking with Jennifer Waters on the chat here. And Jennifer, I'll shoot you the template letter of intent to participate so we can pass along to the Estes Park Sanitation District as well. So if they've got any questions or if you've got any questions, just shout.
Good to go. I just saw Fort Collins Utilities is also on the call, so I appreciate that.
I was going to say some of the foundations because they can mobilize grants.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great idea. If you have any specific ones that you want to bring to our attention, if you want to put those in the chat, Janine, I appreciate that because, especially with one of the things we're going to try and focus on a little differently than what we have done when previous plan updates is given some of the uncertainty in DC, we want to take a much broader look at funding options rather than just focusing on FEMA grants. And we kind of want to look at how resiliency is going to be maintained in Larimer County with or without FEMA grants. So having foundations involved is a fantastic idea. So thank you. All right, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. If you think of anything else, again, please feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to email Josh or myself if you think of something, 3 a.m. you suddenly remember, oh yeah, we should invite so-and-so. Call Josh, don't call me.
Email is preferred at 3 a.m., just saying.
So I say one of the one advantage of being in the consultant side is I get a lot fewer 3 a.m. phone calls than I did when I was on the OEM side. But a large part of the plan also is involving the general public and making sure that they're involved, both because we want them to know what we're doing, but also because we want to get their information, their knowledge as part of our process. So we have 3 main areas that we're doing for public education. We are looking at having 2 public meetings. One, it says June 2025. That was in the original proposal. So obviously we haven't had it yet, but we'll be having that here in August. And at basically at the beginning of the process to kind of introduce the process, ask for people's input up front. And then targeting around January of next year, once we have a draft ready, we're going to put that draft out for review and comment, which is concurrent with bullet number 3 here. We're going to put that draft plan out for review and comment, and we're going to have a workshop where we kind of go through the plan and talk about it and see what people think and get their input on it. So those are the 2 kind of main meetings. We're thinking right now that first one is going to be virtual and the second one will be in person, but we'll see how that goes. We will be doing a public opinion survey we're going to put out here, which just asks folks about their experience with hazards, what they think we should be concerned about, and what they think we should be doing about it. So we'll be putting that out here. We are going to ask all the jurisdictions and our stakeholders and everyone, if you have we ask you to push that link out to your distro lists. And encourage that to get that out to as many people as possible, particularly, again, reaching out to those vulnerable populations or groups that may not be always represented at the table, but we want to make sure we get their input. So that's coming soon. We'll be getting that link out to you here in the next week or 2. Please push that out. And then again, as I mentioned, at the end of the process, we'll put the plan out for public review and comment. If there are any other opportunities or any other suggestions for things for outreach methods, in particular, if there are public meetings you're already having, or there's an outreach session that's already on the calendar and scheduled, and you want to just talk about mitigation for 5 minutes, let us know and we'll happily get you some information and some materials you can use for that. Or if you want Josh or myself or someone to speak at that meeting for 5 minutes or something or whatever, let us know. Generally, our experience doing a bunch of these plans is public meetings about hazard mitigation don't tend to be super well intended because it's not a real sexy concept. But if you're already having a meeting to talk about flood resilience, which people are fired up about and excited, and we want to tie that into this process, it's very easy to capitalize on that meeting to talk about something else or to talk about this. So again, if you think of anything as we go through the process, if 3 months from now you realize you've got maybe it's a county commission meeting or your town council or your board of commissioners or whatever that you want to talk about mitigation for, reach out and let us know, and we'll get that included. I'm not going to go through and read this list to you, but here's just some of the different sources of information that we are looking at and that we use to update this plan. I do want that link there at the bottom. I know you can't click on it during in the Zoom meeting, but that is the link to the current hazard mitigation plan, which again was written by some other guys with wood on their shirts, even though they're still me. So if there are other documents out there that we should be including or that we should have that you have information or that might provide information to this process. If there was a watershed study or a flood analysis or a stormwater report that was done or something that might help inform this process, if you please get us those. You can either drop that link in the chat, or if you just know the name, put it in there and we'll hunt it down. Or if you want to email it to Josh or myself, please do. So again, just if there's anything else out there, anything that might inform this process, I would say for all the participating jurisdictions, we're going to be stalking your websites and try and find your copy of your general plan or your comprehensive plan or your CIP plan or something like that. But we will need for all the participating jurisdictions to include the districts to have some documents of yours that we reviewed. So if you can get those to us up front rather than me having to nag you for them later on, that would be awesome. So for example, if you have a strategic plan for your fire protection district, if you wanted to send that our way, that'd make it easier for us to, rather than having to track that down later. But Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, Scott, one thing I'll add, and I'll find it and paste it in here. All of the current HMPs, to include Larimer County, but as well as the state hazard mitigation plan, you can all find those on our website. So I'll put a link there if you want to, like I said, look at yours or any surrounding counties as well as the state. I'll put the link so you can find that.
Perfect. Thanks. All right, so that's kind of the getting organized stage, which is really the focus of this meeting. Now we get to move into step 2, which, as I say, is the what can go wrong here? What can happen? What bad things can happen here? This is where we're assessing those risks and vulnerabilities. Again, there is an existing plan. We're not starting from a blank page here. We're looking at the plan that was done 5 years ago and just looking to update it. But we're going to talk about, when we talk about hazards, we mean anything that can cause damage, whether that's a natural hazard like a flood or a wildfire, or a technological hazard like a hazardous material spill, a terrorist attack, or a cyber attack or something, anything of that nature, anything that can cause damage in the county. And we'll talk about the specific list of hazards we're looking at here in a minute. And then vulnerability is, what are the stuff we want to protect, and how can they be damaged, or where are they exposed to these hazards? And then community capabilities is, what are the abilities that the community already has in place, whether that's the county, the city government, or just, the local populations. What is out there already to reduce risk, and kind of where those overlap is what we call risk. And that's what we're trying to do, is reduce that, is shrink that risk, whether that's by changing the nature of the hazard, or by reducing vulnerability, or by increasing the community's capability to deal with that. We're trying to reduce that risk. So these are the hazards that were listed in the 2021 plan and the rankings that were there. Our next meeting is going to be totally devoted to the hazard identification risk assessment. So we're going to go through these in detail, but I just wanted to put this up here to kind of remind folks of what is of the hazards that at least were in the previous plan. We may be adding a couple more for this time around, and be curious to ask a question for the group. Actually, let me go on to the next slide. This is, Jason mentioned the state hazard mitigation plan. This is the list of hazards, that perfect timing. So there's the link to that has not just the state plan, but also has links to all the regional and local plans. So for example, if you don't know if you're covered in the Boulder County mitigation plan, you can find that plan there and go check. So these are the hazards that are in the state hazard mitigation plan. We don't have to include all of these, and you'll notice this is a much more natural hazards focus. But are there any other hazards that were not on, either that are on this list that weren't on the previous list, or anything else that might be more of a concern now than it was 5 years ago that we might want to add this year? Let me know what you think. You can either put that in the chat or raise your hand if there's anything in particular you think we should be adding. I'm going to go back here to this list. Is there anything not on this list that keeps you up at night? Now, I would say, remember, if we add a hazard, we're going to have to add mitigation actions for it. So the more hazards we add, the more work we're creating. But the whole point of this plan is to identify the things that, again, the things we're worried about, the things that are keeping you up at night, and identify ways to reduce them. So yeah, heat is a great question, Kirk. And that is something that in the previous plan, we included under kind of spring, summer weather. But we've talked, that was actually something that Lori and Josh and I talked about, of possibly breaking that out this year as its own hazard. Certainly, yeah, it's kind of addressed in drought, and it's kind of addressed in summer weather. But I think breaking that out into its own hazard is something we're definitely going to look at for this year.
We could
So
do
that's a
maybe
great
drought
suggestion.
and extreme heat together. I would think that those would go hand in hand.
Yeah, we could either make sure that, like I said, the drought profile does talk about extreme heat. We can either update or increase the, like, call it out more specifically as a joint hazard in there, or we can break it out into a separate hazard. It doesn't really matter how they're broken down, but yeah, making sure that we address extreme heat for sure. Cyber is another good example. Civil disturbance is basically protests, protests that are causing disruptions, I guess. When you're moving more. Lori, I don't know if you want to address the distinction.
Well, what are your thoughts on instead of civil disturbance? I don't know if this would be too broad, but it would include cyber as well as just kind of human caused threats, because that could include, any number of things, including cyber as well, civil disturbance. But I don't know if you can package that well, since it's so broad.
Yeah, we've certainly seen like terrorism or active threat, or whatever you want to call it, or some kind of we've certainly seen that added as a hazard. So that's certainly Yeah, we could try and lump that into civil disturbance. I know we've seen that in other places where it's any kind of large groups of people behaving badly.
Yeah.
So cyber is another good mention. That's another hazard that obviously was, I mean, it was on the radar 5 years ago, but now it's like it's not on the horizon. That's a much bigger deal, particularly for local governments. Oil and gas wells is definitely something we're going to look at. That would generally fall more under hazardous materials rather than as its own hazard, but it is something we definitely want to make sure we're looking at. Jason?
One point again to add, Scott, is you mentioned that, those are all the state hazards, as in the county doesn't have to have, an action
Right.
or even list those. But I will also say a participant doesn't have to have the same, if you decide as a jurisdiction that this is not even if it is for the county, if it's not something that you're concerned about for your jurisdiction, it doesn't have to be included as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good point. Oh, and so a couple mentioned high wind and so forth. That's included under summer weather and also winter weather, but can sometimes be broken out as its own hazard. It's kind of, there's so many of these hazards that are like linked together. So it's really artificial where you slice between them, but we definitely want to make sure those are all captured. So anyway, give this some more thought. We're going to be talking about this more at our next meeting. We're going to really go through and we're going to update the hazard identification, which is again, what we're going to do and what you'll see if you go look at the current plan, what you'll see in there is, I'm not going to read all the, but we talk about what is the hazard? What are we talking about? How often has it occurred in the past, or what have past occurrences looked like? How much the county is affected, both in terms of how big an area is exposed to it, as well as how big an area is affected by the actual event. So, for example, pretty much the whole eastern part of the county is exposed to tornadoes, but generally a tornado event happens in a relatively small area. We're going to look at how big they are. Magnitude and severity just means how bad, both what is typical as well as what is kind of the worst that we can plausibly expect, what's kind of the worst case scenario look like. We are going to talk about climate change. We know that the weather's already changing, and looking at past occurrences is not going to give us an accurate picture of the future. As they say in the mutual fund commercials, past performance is not a guarantee of future returns. But based on that, we're going to look at how likely or how frequently these hazards happen, or how likely they are to occur in a given year. Then we're going to look at what the impacts are on people, to include both the general public, responders, vulnerable populations. We're going to look at general property. We're going to look at critical facilities. We're going to look at impacts on the economy. We're also going to look at cultural, historical, natural resources, just, impacts on, obviously tourism is a big factor in is a big economic driver in Larimer County, and a big source of pride for a lot of folks. So we want to make sure we're looking at that. This last bullet is one we're going to be particularly asking for your help on, because this is one that we really need your help on, is what has changed in terms of development over the last 5 years, and what is projected to change in the future. And, we can pull like building permit numbers and that sort of thing, but what we really need is your kind of, those of you who, we need your kind of boots on the ground feedback on, are you seeing more development in the floodplain? Are you seeing less development in the wildland urban interface? Is there a new housing development plan for this area that's at risk of landslide? So keep that in mind. That's something we're going to be asking you for to help kind of fill in. And again, what you're going to get in the final plan, and you'll see this in the last plan, is where we're going to map out areas that are most at risk. So for example, here's the FEMA floodplain mapping. And then we're also going to analyze what does that look like in terms of exposure. So for example, for wildfire risk, here's the number of buildings that are at risk, and the number and the value of those buildings, and the number of residents in those buildings that are potentially at risk. I already mentioned some of this, but we're going to look at both residential, commercial structures, critical facilities. This list over here on the right-hand side are the lifeline categories that FEMA uses. This has changed since the last plan. They kind of broke water systems out as a separate as its own kind of lifeline. But we're going to be looking at what is, again, what are the assets that are important to Larimer County? We're very fortunate that Larimer has been very active in building a database of critical facilities. It's called Cascarda. So we're going to be leaning on that to get that information on these critical facilities and try and identify what important facilities are at risk and how they're exposed and what we can do to reduce those. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm kind of going through these a little quickly, just in the interest of not putting everyone to sleep. Again, I mentioned this for both looking backwards since the last 5 years and looking forward, what has changed and what is changing. The more information you can give on that to help us put that in context, the stronger the plan will be. So related, I mentioned, if you remember that Venn diagram we had before of risk, vulnerability, and capabilities. So this is the part where we find out what, or where we talk about what the participating jurisdictions have in place or what's being done to reduce these vulnerabilities. And what we'll be sending out is a list of here's what you answered in the last plan of, you can see, for example, do you have building codes? If so, what year? Do you have a stormwater management program and so forth? This is just a survey kind of to see what's there. There's no expectation that you're going to have all of this stuff, particularly for the small jurisdiction, or sorry, for the small districts. A lot of this isn't going to apply to you, right? But we will send out, we're going to send out something called a plan update guide, which I'll show you here in a little bit. And we're just going to, so here's what you put in the last plan for those of you who participated 5 years ago. What's changed? And again, this is just looking at, what are the capabilities there to mitigate hazards do you have the capability to do these big FEMA projects? For example, if anyone's ever touched a FEMA grant, low maintenance is not, or user-friendly is not a term that anyone has ever applied to a FEMA grant, right? Not even FEMA would call them that. So there is a fair amount of administrative overhead involved in dealing with these grants. If your jurisdiction doesn't have the capacity or the expertise to deal with that, okay, well, that's not a deal breaker, but it's something we need to identify. And how can we help you get that? Or is that an additional contractor you need to bring in? Or is that part of the contract is you also need to request the admin help? It's just something we need to keep in mind as we're developing actions is what are the capabilities you have? All right, and then phase 3 or step 3 is the developing of the mitigation strategy, which again is the what are we going to do about it? This is going to be the focus of our third planning team meeting, which is going to be more of a workshop where we're looking at, okay, based on all the hazards we talked about, what are we going to do about that? And there's kind of 3 different levels to this. First is what are the goals? What are kind of overall, what are we trying to accomplish? Then there's actions or activities, you'll hear them called. These are those specific projects we're looking to do, whether it's need to upsize a culvert here, we're going to do some fuels clearing over here or whatever. And then again, implementation is just it's great that we've come up with a list of stuff. How are we going to do them, right? What's that going to look like? So we'll talk about these at a future meeting. This is the goals from the current 2021 Larimer County Plan. I'm not going to read these at you, but you can see, pretty much what we're covering. They're fairly broad, which is intentional. Protect people and property and resources, increase community resilience, strengthen communication and coordination, increase public awareness, integrate mitigation and other planning techniques. Yeah, that's a great point, Jason. We've seen hiring a grant writer is a mitigation action. Absolutely. Yeah. So we want to recognize that where you need us help with capabilities, we want to find that as well. So anyway, these are the goals. At a future meeting, we're going to talk about these and see if there's any changes that we want to make to them. For right now, we just kind of want to show them to you. Similarly, there's an optional level of objectives, which are kind of halfway between goals and actions. They're not individual projects, but they're a little more implementable, a little more, how are we going to achieve those goals? And you can see these here. We'll talk about these. Some of these may have changed. Usually goals don't change much plan to plan because they're pretty broad, but maybe some of these have. Maybe this is something that we've been doing a lot of this, so we don't need to focus on it as much this time around. Maybe there's other objectives that we want to add. So that's, for a future meeting, but just be aware that that's in the current plan. I do encourage everybody to go take a look at the previous plan. It's not a light read. And I say that as, the guy who helped write it. But there's a lot of good information in there, and I think it will really give you a good context, even if you just skim through it to see what's in it. It'll give you a much better understanding as we go through to update it. Next thing we're going to do below goals and objectives is we're going to look at the mitigation actions that were in the last plan. There were 158 of them that were identified, and 28 of those were specifically for the county, and then each of the jurisdictions had their own actions. What we're going to do is go through and ask you, what have you done? So for each of the jurisdictions that participated last time, we're just going to send you a spreadsheet. It's going to look like this. It's going to say, here's what we had in the 2021 plan. What's updated? What have you done? Tell us if it's still, if it's completed, great. If you finished it, great. Congratulations. We'll check that off and call it a win. Maybe it's in progress. Great. Give us a little information on, well, we wanted to install 10 generators and we've got 5 so far. We want to get 5 more. Perfect. Maybe you haven't started it yet. That's fine. As Jason alluded to earlier, there's no requirement or quota we have to meet. No one expects that you've done no one expects you've done all of these, certainly. If you haven't done any of them, let's have a conversation about why and if there's something we can do to maybe help you achieve them. But no one's going to come take away your FEMA hat because you haven't finished all your mitigation actions from 21. But we do need to know what you've done. Some of them maybe it made sense 5 years ago, but we looked at it and it's not really cost effective. Some of them maybe somebody else wrote that 5 years ago and I don't know what they were smoking, but it doesn't make sense. So we want to delete it. So again, either way, we'll send this spreadsheet around. Take a look at it and get back if the priority has changed, if there's any changes to, like, you got a better cost estimate or you identified any additional partner agencies or something, put that in the implementation notes for us. So we'll send that around to update the actions from the last plan. The next step is going to be identifying new mitigation actions. Okay. One change from 5 years ago is the previous FEMA guidance said that the plan had to have, I think the exact phrase, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, was a comprehensive range of mitigation actions, which is a little on the vague side. And a lot of people interpreted that very differently. So they've made that requirement a little more concrete. I'm actually a fan of this change, but every jurisdiction is required to have one action for every hazard that applies to them. Now, as Jason mentioned, we recognize that not every hazard applies to everyone. If you're a fire protection district in the middle of nowhere, hazmat incidents may not be an issue for you, right? Or particularly for some of the special districts, if your assets, the people in your district may be affected by winter storm, but if it doesn't really affect your assets or your mission, then that hazard, we can say that hazard is NA to you. Or not applicable. But if a hazard applies to you, you do have to have a mitigation action for it. And that's right now in the current plan, that's not the case there because that wasn't a requirement 5 years ago. Again, we'll help you with that. We'll identify which hazards you're missing. In the third planning workshop, which is going to be that mitigation workshop, we're going to give you some lists of different ideas of projects that have been funded or that we've seen in other jurisdictions. Again, this requirement here is we would go into the true mitigation actions in terms of what meets the FEMA definition, but we're not limited to those. So I will be harassing you and saying, hey, I need to make sure we get one good action. But if you have 3 other actions that aren't eligible for FEMA grants, but they're important, cool, we want those. We'll look at those. We'll try and find other ways that you might be able to fund them. But I'm still going to need one good action to meet the requirement to check the box and move forward. Okay.
One thing,
again,
Scott.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to add to that is, and we'll, like you said, we'll get into more of this when we get the mitigation actions, but it doesn't have to be like there can be an action by the county or by a group of participants that applies. It doesn't have to be something completely different than each individual participant. If there's one action that works for all the participants or a good chunk of the participants, that's perfectly fine, and that meets the requirement. It doesn't have to be something completely different than what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a great point, Jason, is if you're doing a project in conjunction with the county, or if 5 municipalities or fire protection districts or whatever are joining together on an action, that's great. That's actually good. We love seeing, and FEMA loves seeing those kind of joint actions and cooperation. So yeah, they don't have to be distinct. You can also have actions that address multiple hazards. In fact, we hope you will, right? So you don't have to have an action that only addresses flood and an action that only addresses wildfire and so forth. We like to see actions that address multiple hazards or solve multiple problems, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Or as my an animal lover friend of mine puts it, feed 2 birds with 1 scone. Take your pick. Again, we have a whole meeting just devoted to that. Lastly, is adopting and implementing the plan. And this is kind of where we get to the, actually finishing plan, the process for getting this plan across the finish line. We're going to go through 4 drafts. First, we're going to have an administrative draft or an internal draft just for the planning team. And the planning team is kind of broadly defined. We have the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee, but also, if you're kind of in on these calls, welcome to the planning team, right? So we're going to have a draft for our kind of internal review. Typically what we do is we put the HIRA out first, the Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment. That's the thickest chunk of the plan and the most kind of technical read. So we get that out to you first. While you're reviewing that, we'll finish up the rest of the plan and get that out for review. We'll also be doing annexes for each of the participating jurisdictions. Will have their own annex of here's how the hazards are different in your jurisdiction. Here are your specific capabilities, your specific mitigation actions. Once we've got a draft of all of that we're happy with, we'll put that out for public review and comment. We talked about that before. We'll have a workshop where we address it with the public. We'll have the plan available online for people to download and review, as well as some summary materials, rather than giving people a 1,000-page document and say, here, tell us what you think. We're going to try and have some more easily digestible chunks for people to review. We'll incorporate whatever comments and feedback we get on the public review, and then we'll send it off to Jason's team for the state review. Once they've approved, like I said, they always do a very thorough review. Usually once we get it past the state, we're pretty confident that we're not going to get too many comments from FEMA, but then we send it off to them for review. Once FEMA approves it, then we'll be asking each of the participating jurisdictions to take it to your governing board, whatever that is, for formal adoption. And that can look like whether that's a resolution by the county commissioners or your city council, or just whatever mechanism you use. Again, whether that's varies for your jurisdiction. There's no set format or stuff that you have to use. We'll give you some go-bys you can use in terms of language. But we'll get your jurisdiction to adopt it. And then once it's been formally adopted and everyone's adopted it, we get final approval from FEMA. The reason we do it that way is this kind of 2-step process is because sometimes you can adopt it before it gets FEMA approved. But then if FEMA requests changes or requires changes, then we don't want you to have to go back to council a second time or third time because we made revisions to the plan, right? So we get kind of that conditional approval. It's called approval pending adoption. And then once it's been adopted by everybody, then the plan is approved. You're good for 5 years. You're eligible for your funds. And now we can talk about implementation and maintenance. And this is where I also want to ask a question of the group is, like I said, I'm always interested to see how the plan has been used over the last 5 years. And there are definitely some jurisdictions we work with where the answer is, we have a plan. I didn't know we had one. Yeah, I know where it is. I know where it lives on the server, right? There are a lot of jurisdictions that unfortunately don't really touch the mitigation plan in between 5-year updates. Luckily, you don't live in one of those jurisdictions. So I know Lori and Josh and OEM have used it, but I want to hear how y'all have used it, where you've touched it, if you've referred to it in other plans. If we updated our comprehensive plan last year and we referenced the hazards in the mitigation plan, or we took projects from the last mitigation plan, and we've rolled them into our capital improvement plan or whatever. If there's anything like that, give it some thought. If you can think of anything right now and you want to put it in the chat, we'd love to see that. That'll also be in the plan update guide that I mentioned we're going to be sending around. We're going to ask for that. So any way that you have cross-referenced or used this plan in other mechanisms. So when I say planning mechanism, that's whether it's an actual plan or just here, we had a series of meetings to discuss this. I'm actually probably more interested in that if it's something where it actually got used. Let us know. We want to identify that, as well as we want to identify opportunities where it can be integrated going forward, right? As much as possible, we want to leverage that. Y'all gonna put a lot of time and effort into developing this plan. We really want it to be something that is useful and is used. Any questions on, I know that was a lot of legalese and requirements. Any questions on anything that we've covered so far? Hearing none, I'm going to keep rolling. Again, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or jump online or ask or email me after the meeting or whatever. So there's a couple planning efforts that are going on. I just want to touch on real quickly so you're aware of them. One is the community rating system, and Jason referred to this during his slides. For those of you who aren't aware, this is an optional program under the National Flood Insurance Program that rewards communities who do kind of above the minimum requirements. And the reward is a discount on flood insurance premiums. The cities of Fort Collins and Loveland both participate in CRS. The county doesn't right now. If you're not aware, the city of Fort Collins so the ratings go from 1 to 9, with 1 being the highest. So Fort Collins is a class 2 community. That is one of the highest cities in the country for the CRS program. I think there used to be one class 1 jurisdiction, but I think I heard they lost that status last time around. It's really hard. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of record keeping. And the city has definitely done a lot of work to maintain that ranking. And class 5 for City of Loveland, that's also no slouch either. That is well above the average of, I think, even among jurisdictions that are participating in Colorado in CRS, I think class 7 is like an average. So Loveland's well above average, and Fort Collins is literally one of the leaders in the program nationally. So we're going to be, as part of this update process, basically they can get CRS credit for this hazard mitigation plan. It counts as a floodplain management plan. For most of y'all, this doesn't matter. For Fort Collins and Loveland, we're going to be having some separate meetings and some parallel planning processes to make sure that we're checking as many of the CRS boxes as can, so they get maximum CRS credit for this planning process. I think last year we left like 5 points on the table. It was like there's like 500 points you can get, and I think we got like 495 or something. I want to see if we can pick up the spare this time and get max credit. So those of you who are in the floodplain management program, we'll be talking about that some more. Another process that's going on, and Josh or Lori, if you want to jump in on this and talk about it. I don't think we have anyone from A&M on this call, do we? But we've met with them. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, no problem. Matt Malika may be on the call, but it's all good. I can speak to it a little bit. So yeah, just for awareness, everyone, we've got a paralleling project that's been kicked off. And it's called the PIRS, or Peers Project is what we're referring to it as. But essentially, there's a team of folks from Texas A&M University that are going to help us at the county look at some of our really important sort of key plans from a land use perspective, really, about how we might be addressing risk reduction efforts or addressing hazards in those plans, and aligning all those plans up to identify where there might be conflicts in those plans or where there might be gaps that aren't addressed at those plans. So they're really looking at integrating these plans in a structural way. And this project that will parallel, our hazard mitigation plan update project, it's going to conclude before our hazard mitigation planning project is going to conclude. So we'll be able to take those findings from where we're seeing gaps in our current plans and address those in our new hazard mitigation plan moving forward. You know, on this note, it might be important to mention also one of the things that we really want to look at in terms of our hazard mitigation plan update here is I know that there are a ton of different plans that are out there that have already identified mitigation related activities or strategies. And we'll want to connect our hazard mitigation plan to all those various other plans that might already list out some activities. So, you know, our intent here is to help integrate and sync up all of these efforts, not to just do another plan thing in a silo, right? So, and part of, you know, in doing so, this Pierce project is really going to help us out with that. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, and we'll be meeting with the Pierce team throughout this process regularly. I'm excited to see this because I've heard about it, but I've never seen it in practice. So I'm really excited. You know, as I said, seeing mitigation works best when it's integrated throughout the process, throughout other processes. So, you know, the whole point of this is to kind of get everybody out of our cylinders of excellence here, our silos, and coordinate between different programs. So I'm really excited about this process. So just be aware that that's going on, and that will. They're analyzing the current plan and seeing where it's integrated and how it can be integrated better. I'm looking forward to getting hopefully some good input from them on things we can do better and do differently to see better integration.
Yeah, and Scott, this is Matt Malik. I'm sorry,
hey Matt,
just wanted to say a quick hi and say that Josh summarized things tremendously. I have been kind of a lurker today, the sort of the fly on the wall role, but yeah, just wanted to say that we here at A&M are really excited to get going on this project. I think it's going to be really great, especially to work with y'all and Larimer County. So
excellent. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you jumping on. Thanks. Okay, we're getting down to the end. I got 4 slides left. If you're still with me, we're getting down to the end. All right, so this is our project schedule. We've got basically a year to get this updated. The current mitigation plan expires September of next year. And again, I want to thank, I know Lori had to drop off, but I want to thank Josh and Lori in absentia for not waiting until the last minute. We do occasionally, we get a lot of calls where it's like, hey, this plan expires in 6 months, help. So the fact that they like applied for funding well in advance and have plenty of time to go through this process. So this is, there's a lot going on with this process, and you'll see we have some CRS stuff, you know, spliced through in here. We've got coordination with the peers team, but there's a lot of stuff going on over the next 12 months. But so there is a lot to happen. 12 months is the nice thing now is we have enough time that if, you know, say hypothetically you were to have another big wildfire in the middle of the process, because that didn't happen last time. You know, last time you only had 2 federally declared disasters during the mitigation plan update process. And that's not counting COVID as well. So hopefully this will be a less eventful update process, but there is time built into the schedule that when stuff happens that we can kind of flex and adjust. But to hit the high points for you, here we are in late August with our kickoff meeting. Coming up in the next month, we're going to do that the first public meeting that I mentioned, as well as we're having we're looking at scheduling a meeting for the CRS participating communities to make sure we're all kicking off and getting off on the right foot with that and making sure we're going to meet the requirements there. If you are not a CRS community, but your jurisdiction is interested in participating, this is mostly for the municipalities. But if you think you should be part of that conversation, or alternately, if you're a watershed group or someone who has an impact on floodplain stuff in a big way, and you would like to be involved in those conversations, shoot Josh or myself an email and we'll include you. The next meeting, the next full meeting of this planning team, we're targeting October for the plan. This is going to be focused on that hazard identification and risk assessment. What's going to be happening over the next 2 months is we're going to be analyzing data and pulling records of past disaster incidents and hazard incidents, and trying to update that data and our maps and analysis and so forth, so that we can present that to you and say, here's what we've looked at. Here's what we think has changed in the last over the last 5 years, and asking for your feedback. Again, all of this is we really need you to help us kind of ground truth all of this information. we really hope that you'll come and tell us where we're wrong, because that's the point of this process. Is we don't want this to just be a plan that a bunch of mercenaries from Denver wrote. We want it to reflect the reality on the ground in Larimer County, and that's where we need y'all to help us. The third and final planning team meeting then would be, and we probably aren't going to have it at the end of, we promise not to have it the week before Christmas, okay? This is a rough schedule, and we'll work around the holidays, but the third meeting is going to be that planning team workshop where we, again, get together and we look at, based on, here are the actions that we're in the previous plan, here's some other stuff we've identified, and we develop some good actions and projects that we can move forward with. There'll also be, again, another CRS review meeting here towards the end of the process to, again, making sure we've checked all the boxes for that and maximized our credit there. Once we put the plan out for public review and comment here after the first of the year, we're going to have another public meeting there where we actually introduce the plan and talk about it and encourage the public to look at key parts of the plan and give us some feedback. Then it goes in for state review, as I mentioned, and then to FEMA review. Obviously, we can't control, this is where it's out of our hands, but Jason seems to be, they're really good about getting stuff turned around quickly. FEMA has 45 days by statute to get it back, and they're usually running right about that now, so it's pretty good. And then we'll give you some time to adopt it locally before we finish the plan, and wrap up the project and move into implementation. So again, dates to be announced, but this is the schedule generally of what we're looking at here. All right, so what are the next steps in terms of what we would like you to do? So for those of you who are participating jurisdictions in the plan, and again, this is where you are meeting the FEMA definition of participation that we talked about earlier. You're attending the meetings. If you miss one meeting, it's not the end of, you don't have to attend every meeting in person, but you're attending meetings, you're providing information, you're developing mitigation actions, you're providing feedback on the draft plans and your annex and so forth. If you're doing all that, these are the things that we're asking or expecting, rather, from you in order to check that box as a participating jurisdiction. These are all the things we're going to be expecting you to do to include at the end of the day, formally adopting the plan. I mentioned this plan update guide here, which we're going to be sending around. I'll give you a little preview of that. This is mostly focused on there's kind of a review of, this is the one-page summary of everything I've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. And then we'll go through the capability assessment of what was listed in the previous plan. And like I said, here's what you said 5 years ago, what's changed? If nothing's changed, great. If something has changed, there are a few things that weren't questions 5 years ago that we're asking more information on this year. So we'll ask you to fill in that information for us as relevant for the jurisdictions that are in the National Flood Insurance Program. We'll again have some questions for you about that. We'll have some broad questions. Please don't skip these. I feel like maybe we should put these up front but some of them are we want you to go through the capability assessment, but this is kind of where we get into kind of the real nitty gritty. And this is where we really need that local expertise on development trends, change in community priorities. What are vulnerable populations or communities that you're concerned about in your jurisdiction, or what have you seen? So these kind of narrative questions, don't skip the essay part. Okay, it's a large part of your grade, not that you get a grade on it. And then also recent hazard events. And this is, we'll send this out for everybody to fill out, but if there's what has happened, in the last 5 years that we should be aware of. Obviously, we know what disaster declarations have occurred and that sort of thing. But if there have been other, like, you had a flood here a couple of years ago and this damaged this area and we're concerned about it, or whatever, we want to make sure we capture those. So you can you can fill out as many of these as possible, or if you just want to send us a link to a news article about a school closure or something that happened, you can send us all that information. So we're going to be sending this plan update guide out. Again, this is for the participating jurisdictions. Please fill that out as detailed as possible, as much as you can, and get that back to us by I think we're asking for it back the end of September. So we'll get that out to you shortly. for our other stakeholders and partners that are participating in the plan or participating in the process, but are not participating jurisdictions, and I know I'm overusing those air quotes here, but basically everybody else that's not looking to adopt the plan, we still want you to be engaged in the process, provide us information. If you're on this plan or if you attended this meeting, we're going to have your email address and you'll be on the distro list for questions and for future meetings and so forth. So please attend as many meetings as you can. Help us publicize things like the public meetings and the public survey and so forth. Help us push that information out as much as possible. Provide any data or information that you think we might want. We're going to be asking you for some stuff, but don't wait. You don't have to wait for us to ask. If you have, again, a recent study that, or maybe not even recent, but something that you think we ought to know about, you don't have to wait for us to ask for that. Please send it to me or Josh, and we'll get that included. If you do have mitigation efforts or activities, either that you are currently working on, and we alluded to this earlier, there's a lot of stuff going on in Larimer County that is reducing risk from hazards that isn't called mitigation per se, right? But if it may be in another plan that is called a stormwater reduction plan, right? Or a drought resiliency plan. And those plans have actions in there that you're doing. It may not be called mitigation, but it's still mitigation. So we'd like to integrate that again into this plan and this process as much as possible. So help us identify those. And then when we send the draft plan out for review and comment, again, we really need your help to make this your plan, not just, again, something that a consultant wrote. So, all right, that is an hour and 40 minutes of mostly me talking, and even I'm tired of the sound of my voice. So what questions do you have, or any comments, anything else that you want to reference? If you haven't signed the participation tracker, please scan this QR code, or there was the link in the chat, and please let us know that you were here. Other questions or comments from anyone else? Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Well, on that point, Scott, people are probably tired of me hearing me talk too. But the one thing I'll add to the last piece you said there is work on other projects, whether it be a CWPP or stormwater or whatever. You're absolutely able to use that as one of your mitigation actions. It doesn't have to be so you can absolutely, when you're looking at that kind of stuff, review those documents and make sure you're incorporating those. And that's what we want to see happen, but it's not cheating if it's here, and I can also find it here.
Absolutely. Thank you I usually mention that, Jason. That's a great point, is like every stormwater person in the country I've ever met has a list of culverts that they want to upsize, right? And some of them may be, on the list, you've maybe funded and we're doing it next year. Some of them may just be on the wish list for someday, but that's a great list of mitigation projects right there, right? That's a great list of actions. So if you have those lists of stuff that you want to do someday when money falls out of the sky, make sure we capture those lists and we get it integrated in this plan. So other questions or comments from anyone? Somebody ask a question so I know you're awake. No, I'm kidding. All right, that's all I've got. If you do have any questions afterwards or anything else, again, feel free to email Josh and/or myself. Josh, I'll hand it back to you to close us out.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And ditto to what Scott said, y'all. Feel free to get in touch with myself or Scott if any questions, or if you wanted to talk through anything offline. Happy to work with you guys, on all the things. So, yeah, Scott, appreciate you facilitating this. Jason, thanks for jumping on from DHSEM's perspective, and to everyone, thank you guys for joining the call today. So more to follow as we go through over the next year or so. All right, everybody. Have a good day.
Give you 15 minutes back in your day.
Yep.
Have a good one.
See ya.